This conversation is brought to you ad-free thanks to the generous support of the Howl in the Wilderness Patreon community. To gain access to early release of all episodes, the full podcast archives, and other extras, visit patreon.com/Howl in the Wilderness. Edith Hall, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast. It's really nice to meet you.
It's my pleasure.
Well, I've been conducting this series of conversations around various mythic figures, and mostly with depth psychologists, Jungians, but you're the first classicist that I think I've had on the podcast, and you've just published this book on Medea, which is an interesting take. It's called Medea, a Life. And although you're a scholar and a classicist, you chose to put together her story into a narrative that reads more like a novel. And I think that's quite a novel approach and quite bold for a scholar.
I think there is a recognized genre called docu-fiction. That's what I think it's in. That wasn't my original plan. I mean, Yale University Press came to me and said, had I any interest in writing a biography of Medea? And my first reaction was yours, really. I thought, well, how can you write a biography of a mythical character? But when I started thinking about it, there's this ancient, very, very intelligent ancient Greek geographer called Strabo, who's working under the Roman Empire. And he's actually from the Black Sea himself. He's very, very interested in local traditions. And Medea is one of the most famous people ever to come out of the Black Sea. And he is quite clear that it's entirely plausible that in the late Bronze Age, when Greece was already getting interested in exploring and trading with communities around the Black Sea, it was entirely plausible that bride was brought back from the Black Sea to Greece, and that terrible things ensued, as they sadly rather often do with migrant spouse stories when people introduce people into completely different cultures. He thought this was entirely plausible and located it in the ancient Greeks' interest, especially in certain products from the Black Sea, especially gold from the rivers of Georgia, and there is alluvial gold there. So I thought, well, if it's good enough for Strabo, I'll have a go. And then I read literally every single ancient text that ever mentions Medea.
I know, the
That's,
notes are extensive.
yeah, I know. And that's where the scholar came in. And there is a surprising overall consistency.
Mhm.
The details, there's massive difference, but the actual arc of her life, it came out with extraordinary consistency. And I'm a great believer in traveling to places I'm reading about.
Mm.
So I made it my business. I'd already been to Georgia several times. I have a very close contact at Tbilisi University. And I'd been to most of the places, but I had not been to two or three of them. I made it my business to go to them, to feel what it was like to live there, to look at the late Bronze Age sites, in particular the palace in Iolkos in Thessaly, which is where the Argo originally set out from and came back. The actual palace where chapter 4 takes place, I have visited it.
Mm.
So I began to really feel as though this woman was in touch with me. I know that sounds a bit woo-woo,
Not
but
here.
no, okay. I began to really think about that. I had also, in previous scholarship, 15 years ago, done a very great deal of work on forensic psychology. I got interested in how the crimes in ancient Greek myths, how people now who are psychologists and psychiatrists, how they write about people who do the kinds of crimes that we get in Greek myth. And I became very convinced that the Greeks really knew what they were talking about here.
Hmm.
In particular, the profile of filicidal mothers, that is, women who kill not just any child, but their own children. Filius is son, filia is daughter. There is a very distinct profile. And I read some studies from North American, not Canadian, USA, big scale studies. And there is a very distinct pattern, which Euripides' Medea utterly fits.
Hmm.
We can talk more about that if you like. So I
Yeah.
thought I'm going to try and imagine how on earth, what sort of person could have been brought to such a pitch that she did that. And I hope I built up quite a plausible psychological narrative. I do think that she had, I don't know, I'm not myself a psychiatrist, though I did spend 7 incredibly useful years in therapy in my 30s, so I'm a fan. Okay. It saved my life. It made me able to become a happy person and make good relationships and become a mother myself. Um, so I tried to use a lot of that expertise to build up the personality, but then used especially Euripides' Medea for the terrible chapter where she actually does it, actually
Hmm.
kills the children. What could have put her over the edge? I do think she must have had very great empathy problems. I think she is someone, I don't think, I mean, I don't know the technical terms, but I don't think she's a narcissist.
Hmm.
But I think she has something that's either inborn or both inborn and happens to her in childhood that made it very, very hard for her to trust anybody
Hmm.
and to fight tooth and nail for herself. That was her default position, that only she could help herself.
Yeah.
And actually, I personally slightly relate to that because of my own childhood, that it really has always been down to me and I can't lean on people.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of me in there as well, though mercifully I've never felt inclined to take a weapon to my own children.
Yeah. Well, you've been studying and lecturing on Medea and her story for years.
40.
Yeah. Okay. Um, and one of the questions I'm always curious about is like, what is it about this particular figure that
Mm.
captivated you to the extent where, you've devoted much of your professional life to her? So I think you're alluding to that there was some feeling of affinity with this woman who had to look out for herself and
Yeah.
do whatever it took to make sure that she survived. Have I wondered, like, maybe it'd be helpful for people who aren't so familiar with Medea if we gave like a kind of a sketch
Yeah.
of her biography as you've kind of put it together, pieced it together from all these various sources.
Yeah.
Myself, I mean, as a child growing up in the 70s and 80s, every Saturday afternoon, I think they ran Jason and the
The
Argonauts.
Argonauts.
Yeah, the Harryhausen version with the stop motion skeletons
Marvelous
and
film.
all of that. Yeah,
Fantastic film.
yeah. So that was my, I guess, introduction to her. But beyond that, not having studied the classics in school or anything like that, that's all I knew of her. And
Yeah.
so recently, kind of getting into more of the wider mythology of the
Yeah.
ancient Greek world, finding out that she's one of the most kind of intriguing and complex characters and most written about, most painted. And so there's something about her that is so captivating and enduring. So maybe just
Okay.
give people the general outline if you would.
All right. Um, so it does work in 5 acts. I originally called the book Medea Life in 5 acts, right? There are 5 distinct phases until she's about 50. And then we really don't know much about what happened to her after those. So she's a little girl who is born to the royal family in Colchis, which is the ancient kingdom of Georgia. in the Black Sea, which uh, was founded by her Greek father, who is the son of the sun. He's Helios's son. She has a very unhappy childhood. He's a very, very unpleasant man. That is quite clear in all of the sources. And her mother was largely absent. Her mother was a sea nymph who hated her husband, who was very rough with her. So she felt abandoned by her mother, and this is crucial to my portrait of her. And so when a handsome Greek prince turned up, namely Jason of Jason and the Argonauts fame, he's been sent on a very dangerous, deadly mission to bring the golden fleece back from Greece, this incredibly valuable object, which probably in the myth symbolizes that alluvial gold that the Greeks were trying to get, right? He set some terrible ordeals by her father, they've got to lull to sleep the terrible dragon who guards the golden fleece, and he's got to defeat an army that arises out of some teeth of the serpent that is thrown. She helps him because she has magical powers. She has been an acolyte in the temple of Artemis Hecate. Artemis is the Greek virginal goddess of the wild and hunting and women's biological transitions, menarche, menopause and death, and childbirth. But her underside is Hecate, who is the witch goddess of the underworld. Medea knows all of these arts, so she helps Jason, escapes with him on the Argo, and they come back after many travels to Greece, where he is going to try and reclaim his throne that was taken from him in a place called Iolkos, which is in Thessaly on the middle. If you look at a map of Greece, it's bang in the middle of the east coast. And at first they're quite happy as a couple. They have two little boys and appear from all the sources to have had a very good sexual connection. But he fails to win back his throne. The guy who deposed him and sent off for the Golden Fleece. And this is the first time when she really thinks, oh my word, no one's going to do anything if I don't. And she has a plot to kill off the old king, which she succeeds in doing. Very elaborate story about boiling him up in a cauldron. But the coup fails because the people don't want a couple who've murdered the king. They don't want Jason as a king. So yet again, she's sent off, right? They're in exile. Where to go? They go to Corinth because her father originally came from Corinth. She thinks maybe they'll take her in, right? Because it's her ancestral homeland. And it's in Corinth that Jason, her husband, becomes very, very ambitious. He's offered the hand of the Princess of Corinth. The King of Corinth, Creon, has no male offspring. Jason is actually offered her hand in marriage with the expectation of becoming King of Corinth. So he dumps Medea. That is where he dumps her. And very callously, without explaining to her why or anything, and leaves her alone with the kids. She sends a poisoned robe to his new bride, murders her. The king tries to save his daughter, but because the poisoned robe has burst into flames, he also dies. And then Medea, having committed these two murders, as well as the ones in Thessaly, oh, sorry, she also killed her brother on the escape route, right? So the body count is rising.
Yeah.
She has a long, long think, and this is the great tragedy by Euripides that takes up the entire chapter 4 of my book. She realizes that however much she may love her children, the way to inflict the greatest pain on Jason is not to kill him, to leave him alive, but with his new bride dead and his son's dead. So she does it. She then manages to flee because she's got magical powers. She gets her grandfather Helios's sun chariot, goes off to Athens, spends 20 years there, and has another child. The king takes her in, and I leave it open as to whether this child is Jason's or King Aegeus's
Hmm.
until right at the end of the novel. And I maybe won't give you the spoiler because that's what you've got to read through. She tries to kill off the king of Athens' slightly older son so that her son can become king of Athens, and that fails. So the whole story ends with her yet again going off into exile. One of the reasons she's become an archetype is that there is no record anywhere that she died. None.
Hmm.
She just disappears. And what I like to think is that she's out there somewhere punishing faithless husbands, callous fathers, and irresponsible, adulterous men everywhere. That she somehow lives on in the anger of women under
Hmm.
patriarchy. I think that's, although she resorted to absolutely terrible things, she refused to buckle under, right? She was not going to let the patriarchs win. So I think this is a very profound feminist message. And is no woman alive who hasn't at some point thought about committing some terrible atrocity because they're so angry at
Hmm.
men. I really believe that. I really, really believe it. And actually, I've got more and more convinced of that the older I get. I mean, I'm a happily married woman. I've been with my husband since therapy when I found after therapy for 35 years. I am not an angry Andrea Dworkin. I do not think all men are evil, but I do think that there is no woman who has not seethed with rage at some point. So that's
Yeah.
the story.
Yeah. Well, there's one part of her genealogy. I mean, not only is that she kind of is descended from divinity, from Helios, but
Yeah,
also her aunt is famous sorceress witch Kirke, Circe.
Circe, yes, she is. I actually leave that out. I mean, it is mentioned that she is, but the part of the story that had Medea and Jason travel all around the known world is a later development.
Hmm.
It's not in the earliest sources, and I've tried to stay true to the earliest sources. I think they simply came back from the Black Sea the way they went through the Hellespont and back down to Greece. I've made the idea. I've had that whole other story of the fabulous travels. I've had that as a fictional song. It's sung by Orpheus, who's the bard on the ship. That he invents this
Hmm.
fabulous backstory to try to, I don't know, burnish the reputation of the Argonauts. So we get the story,
Right.
but it's as an embedded epic poem. It's not. I'm trying to get to hardcore reality of what a Black Sea wife would have actually gone through.
Right. So this is kind of like something later added to her legend. And
Yes.
so if she's got magical powers, then she must somehow be related to the most famous sorceress, Kirke, or
Yes, I think so. And I don't play up her magical powers very greatly.
yeah.
Some people who write novels about Medea do. I'm much more. Yes, they're a resource she's got. Okay, she has got. She can do some things that other people can't, and she knows all about drugs and has some extra insights into psychology and so on. And she can
Hmm.
um, do clairvoyance if she has to. She can see what's going on behind walls if she has to. But she's basically wants, I think, and I've tried to do that. She actually wants to be a normal woman living a normal, happy life. She actually doesn't want political power, unlike some other women in Greek myth, evil women like Clytemnestra. She's not after she just wants not to be subject to any male phallocrat and just live a nice life and sort of be left alone.
Hmm. I mean, she tends to kill people in an incredibly brutal way. Like she has an affinity for chopping people up and scattering their parts. I mean, why do you think it's so brutal? I mean, like a lot of mythic women might kill by poisoning,
Yes.
right? But she's like hands-on, brutal. Why? Why do you think that
Well,
is with her?
she can do poisoning when she tries to kill the King of Athens' son. The last one, it is poison that she
Mm.
tries to use. She has that capacity. With her brother, uh, she killed him. She actually had to, and I've tried to very much. I mean, it was her or him. He had been sent to pursue her. If he had got her and was able to take her back to her father, she would have been probably tortured to death for betraying them and the Golden Fleece to this incoming guy. You know, she
Hmm.
she had to get rid of him. Um, I try to make out that the first murder is actually one that would be really defensible in court in terms of self-defense, right? It was her or him. Jason also joined in that one. They did it together. They only chop him up when he's dead, I have to say. He didn't suffer the pain of being dismembered. He was just killed with a sword by Jason, though she colluded.
Oh. Mm.
He's cut up in order because this whole fleet is chasing them, and she thinks that quite rightly, she's very clever, that the guys in these ships will not want to not go back with a body to the
Yeah, so
father.
it's kind of like a scavenger hunt. Keep them busy for a while.
Keep them busy because there's several ships. They've got
Yeah.
to try and find different bits to try and put the courts back together so that the king isn't too angry with them. So I've tried to make out the very confusing one. I should have said earlier when I said book 4, the Thessaly murders of chapter 3. That is very, very odd. So she wants to kill the king, and again, it is Jason's throne. This guy was a horrible tyrant who had ousted them from the throne. There is moral justification usually of
Mm.
she could get her in court, but instead of poison, you're quite right. She does this unbelievably elaborate thing where she pretends to his daughters that she can rejuvenate mammals, right? And she uses a goat. She puts a very, very old goat in a cauldron and boils it up, and then transposes a lovely young billy goat. So she convinced these girls, which means that they're actually the ones who put their father in the cauldron.
Mm.
She's trying to sort of put the blame on them. Maybe, I mean, it's pretty horrible to them, and I make a lot out of how she really abused those poor girls. They loved their dad. They wanted to. They're called the daughters of Peleus, the Pleiades. They loved their dad. They thought, because they're very stupid and didn't ask about her motives, that they were going to rejuvenate him because he's very, very old and dying and he's got arthritis. So she gets dark there. That's where she gets really, really dark. Like total frustration that she's supposed to be queen of Iolcos in Thessaly, and she's not. She's having to live in disguise. That's where she turns to the darkness, as far as I'm concerned.
Mm. You ever see, you must have, Pasolini's version of Medea?
Yeah,
What'd you
Maria
think of,
Callas.
yeah, what'd you think of Maria Callas? I mean, I thought just like she carried that kind of that cold ruthlessness that was needed for her survival. Like,
But I loved the Pasolini movie, and I've read what he wrote about it. He was a sort of class warrior and an anti-imperialist warrior, and he saw it really as a parable for what happens um, when first world colonialists um, trample on traditional cultures, right? So the symbolism is that she is the representative of a much older way, and that the killing of the children, even however wonderfully and passively she does it, she's amazing. And of course, that face,
Yeah.
incredible. But it's as though he had rubbished her culture by leaving those sons,
Mm.
right? That this was disrespect. So there's almost a sort of strange altruism in it, that she's not going to let him, she's going to take charge of those boys.
Mm.
So Pasolini saw it as quite an anti-imperialist
Mhm.
thing, that she was a sort of heroine of oppressed peoples the globe over.
Yeah, like I think kind of standing in for indigenous people.
Yes,
There's that scene where she crosses the Black Sea, and when she arrives on the other side, she's totally forlorn. She realizes that she has no connection to the earth in this place, and is trying to figure out like how to communicate with the sun. It's an incredible scene
it
of
really
like
is,
of displacement.
and brings out her tragedy very
Yeah.
profoundly. And also, in some sense, I think justifies, if not justifies, at least explains that his disrespect for her and her children by moving on to a Greek woman
Mm.
is needs punishment.
Mm.
It needs punishment, and if that happens to unfortunately be the best way to do it, I kind of, I think he made a really coherent case there.
Hmm. And there is something about her being this archetypal force of punishment, of vengeance, because she's not scorned by the gods, but she's actually given Helios's chariot at the end, which is a suggestion that she's kind of doing right by the gods in a way.
Absolutely. And in Medea, the play by Euripides, which is so astute psychologically, for the first half of it, she's presented as a totally normal, well, not quite normal, but a regular, a regular Homo sapiens. Okay. The
Right, a
dialogue
human.
is very natural. They talk like any other bickering married couple. She's not given any elaborate superpowers. She's a woman at home with her kids, and so we're relating to her as a human. But what becomes apparent, because she repeatedly says this great law for the ancient Greeks about oath breaking, which is very difficult for us completely to relate to in modern worlds where proofs of identity and DNA and witnesses and photographic evidence. To be in a world where there's none of that surety meant that one of the greatest taboos was oath breaking. And if you broke an oath, then Zeus, no less, the very top god, he's got a title, Zeus Horkios, Zeus, god of oaths, will smite you with a thunderbolt. And the fundamental importance of this in a society where you've got to trust that somebody is who they say they are. You can make them sway this oath that their life depends on them keeping.
Hmm.
And she says several times, most scholars aren't sensitive to this. She, I think, believes she is carrying out Zeus's justice because he's broken his marriage oath to her.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I think you're right. She is in some sense a supernatural force of divine punishment.
There are other accounts where, if I'm correct in remembering that the killing of the children was by accident. So there's conflicting reports.
There are, and this is why Euripides' version is so stark and so
Mm.
important, because he actually has her, and that's the one I've chosen, because that is the greatest source of them all. She actually stands in front of the audience and says, I know what I'm going to do is wrong, but my rage uh, has overcome my ability to deliberate calmly. She actually says that. And that's become very famous actually in the ancient philosophers. If she's saying, I know what I'm going to do is wrong, but I can't help myself do it, that's very interesting in terms of splitting of your psyche.
Hmm.
right? That you can both know something is wrong and still be unable to prevent yourself from doing it. That to me is incredibly interesting, and that's the one I've gone for. However, you're quite right. There were at least three other versions. In one of them, the Corinthians killed the children in rage because she killed their king and his daughter, and then tried to lay the blame on her. Right? In another, and some modern feminists like that one, that she was completely innocent.
Right.
Right?
Lets her off the hook. Yeah.
Let's let off the Another one, which is very interesting, is that the Corinthians were coming for her after she killed the princess and the king. And she killed them to save them from a much more unpleasant death. So that was an altruistic motive, that by quickly cutting their throats, they did not have to undergo being basically torn to pieces by an enraged horde. That was very popular, would you believe, in the 19th century. Most adaptations of Medea in the 19th century used that one because it allowed them both to have the horror, but also not to face full frontal the thing that we all can't cope very, very easily, which is the idea of a woman in full command of her senses, killing the children she has given birth to. And we all know the vilification that women who do that get. They
Hmm.
get it far more than men who kill their children. It's regarded as the crime of all crimes.
Yeah.
And women prisoners, I teach a lot in prisons, and women in prison who've killed their own children are given a terrible time by the other women,
Hmm.
really. But I think
Right.
most of
It's
us
like it's
just
kind
can't.
of the female version of a male pedophile going into jail. Like
Yes,
they're,
it's
yeah,
the equivalent of, it's
it's like the
exactly that,
highest crime, the most unthinkable thing
of
you
that a
could
woman can
do.
do.
You override the maternal
Yeah,
instinct.
yeah.
Yeah.
People find, but I think the reason why people find it terrifying is not actually just revulsion. I mean, of course,
Because
it's
they
revolting.
find it terrifying because everyone's thought of it at one point or another.
Exactly. And we've all felt unbelievable rage, both towards our parents and towards our children. It's
Yeah.
exactly what it is. We've got to have this taboo because we're so frightened of negative feelings towards our own children, and just hatred in the family. We're terrified of it.
Yeah. Well, before psychology, we had well, literature. Before that, like mythology, and the Greeks were so psychologically astute. They understood the kind of psychological importance of acting out all of these different scenarios that reflected so many varieties of human experience on the stage, so that people could experience catharsis and
That's right.
pathos, and
That's right.
so it was kind of therapy.
Emotional honesty. The Greeks
Uh-huh.
were very brutal. There's lots not to like about them when you know them as well as I do but they're hardly ever hypocritical, right?
Hmm.
They don't pretend, they don't try to turn a bad emotion into an altruistic motive, right? Which is terribly British. British hypocrisy. Uh, my husband always laughs at my birth family, as I'm afraid I do call them, the way people talk. So if you had a selfish urge, instead of owning it, uh, you had to present your pursuit of it as doing a favor to someone else. So my older brother would always try to get the cream off the top of the milk. In the old days, there'd be cream on top of the milk for his breakfast cereal. And he would say, I think I ought to do this because Edith doesn't want to get fat. Not, I'm bigger, I'm older, I'm male, and I'm bloody well having the cream, right?
Yeah.
Now, the Greeks would definitely say, I'm bigger and older and uglier, and I'm therefore having the cream. And my birth family, which is very Christian, my father was a Christian pastor. You could never ever admit to a selfish urge. You always had to figure out how to present it altruistically, and this really did my brain in as a kid. And I think
Yes.
this is one of the reasons why the ancient Greeks spoke so loud to me, because Medea stands there and says, I know what I'm going to do is completely wrong, but I've got to do it because I am just so enraged.
Hmm.
And I love that. I mean, I don't love the fact she feels like that, but I love the fact that she doesn't come out with an altruistic motive like that later version
Yeah. It's like
of
they
us doing that.
understood the destructive aspects of the shadow,
I
which
think they understood
our
the
culture
id.
wouldn't get and for, centuries later until the 1900s when, Nietzsche and Carl Jung come along and
Well, the most amazing moment of all in Greek tragedy, which of course Sigmund Freud made much of, was when Jocasta says to her son and husband Oedipus, "Don't worry, every man has thought about sleeping with his mother in his dreams."
yeah.
That's the most amazing line. And that's what invented the entire sort of Oedipus complex in Sigmund Freud. And also, we happen to have an ancient dream book, which you might be interested in,
Mm.
by a man called a dream interpreter. He was a professional. You went along and gave him a drachma and told him your dream, and he would interpret it. And we've got his book. And there are 17 different dreams that he records of patients about them having sex with their mothers in different positions.
Now, I've heard about this because I've done some research into Asclepius and I'm fascinated by the practice of incubation and all that. But have those actually been translated, those dream reports?
Yes, yes, there's a very good recent Oxford World's Classics translation of Artemidorus.
Oh,
Artemidorus, and he is called The Interpretation of Dreams, and Freud nicked the title.
oh, he did. There wasn't
Yeah.
a reference to Freud.
No, Freud read Artemidorus's dream book, which was
And went,
available,
aha.
and because Artemidorus had called it The Interpretation of Dreams in ancient Greek,
Wow.
Freud called his book The Interpretation of Dreams. The Greeks all thought, though, they had a very uh, rigid view that all dreams were predictive.
Hmm.
They didn't, which is why Oedipus is sort of worried, right? If you have dreams about it, you're going to do it. Whereas what Freud says is, of course, no, this is the path into the unconscious, and often it's about the past.
Mhm.
It's either about your unacknowledged desires when you're a waking person, or it's actually even darker. It's about an actual experience that has happened to you.
Right, and been repressed, yeah.
But Jung is more interested, he's interested in Electra, and having a thing about her father. Um, I'm very interested in, I found Melanie Klein very helpful in terms of the splitting of the mother, good breast, bad breasts, and all that. I
Hmm.
found that extremely helpful for myself in terms of maternal ambivalence, both ways, both the child towards the mother. I've also been a stepmother, I have to say, very successfully, I'm delighted to say.
Mm.
She's very happy. I brought up not only my own children with my husband, but he had a child, he had a daughter. But so Melanie Klein helped me so much because she would just project onto me when she was little the darkest fears about a wicked mother figure. It was like in fairy tales. Uh, I mean, the cure for that was like 20 years of conscientious care. Just steadfast kindness, right? Not expecting her to call me mother, just steadfast, kind lady. And it
Hmm.
worked, I'm
Hmm.
delighted to say. But I found Klein very helpful. And siblings. I'm one of four. And to me, my conflicted relationships, which we were all starved basically of love. And I think if you're starved of love as children, um, it is impossible not to hate your siblings because you think they're getting more.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
it the resource is too small to go round.
Yeah.
So,
Especially when they're taking all the good cream off the top, you know.
well, if you're number three out of four, yes.
You're getting scraps. Yeah.
Well, I had two much stronger, older, they were physically stronger. They're both athletes.
Yeah.
I was the little geeky, brainy one.
Yeah, I know the
So,
feeling.
oh, really? Was
Yeah.
it like that for you?
Yeah.
But
Well,
Melanie Klein's insistence that the sibling can be as just as important as the parent.
oh my God, totally. Yeah, because they're
Um,
closer and they're there when the parents aren't around, and so all kinds of stuff goes
and
on.
they're who you model your relationship with your peers with, not with authority figures. It's
Mm.
how you get on in peer groups is that's what you take with you. So it's
Yeah.
very sad, and I have to say that since both our parents died, I have had to remove myself. They just made me too unhappy.
Mm.
My siblings. I've got adopted wonderful friends who are fantastic siblings. It having had an unhappy childhood. I mean, we kept in touch as long as my mother was alive because she was like, I always think of she was Tito. It's like Yugoslavia. It's like Yugoslavia held together till Tito died. But then the unifying force. But all of this personal biography, which I have laid out you haven't read my book, Facing Down the Furies, I don't think.
Mm. No.
Okay, that's the one which is about, because my mother's family were all suicides.
Wow.
And that's about how Greek tragedy helped me break that cycle.
Mm.
Um, that the Furies for me are not intergenerational curses, they're the intergenerational baggage that gets imposed on you.
Mm.
Because my grandmother was called Edith and she killed herself when I was a child. And my mother just dumped it on me, all of us, all four of us, but me far more because I was called Edith and she decided I was like her mother.
Mm.
So
And
I've written a book
destined to
where
the same fate.
that's the book where I talk a very great deal actually about psychology rather than the Medea one.
Mm. Yeah. Um, while I've got you, this rare opportunity to speak to a real classicist,
Yeah.
I mean, are you sick of people asking you what you think of Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey yet?
I'm beginning to get sick of it, but I've got I've done I think five radio shows, two newspaper articles, and that's only about a quarter of what's landed in my inbox. I'm doing the last one tonight for Sky News.
Hmm.
What did I think of it? Fantastic entertainment, great action movie. You can take your kids. You really can. It's not that violent. There's
Hmm.
no nudity. Highly entertaining. Go to an IMAX, get the immersive experience. It, however, as a classicist, completely evaded the psychological complexity of the original poem.
Well, that's interesting because a lot of people are lauding it as a kind of depiction of a man who's suffering from like war trauma and PTSD. But I think it seems quite unsophisticated when compared to the original. I mean, one of the glaring things for me was the lack of wit. I mean, it's very,
Oh, totally! I'm
you
so
know,
glad you said that. The Odyssey is so funny.
it's pretty grim, this
The
film.
Odyssey is so funny. He missed all the tricks
Yeah.
for humour. But when I say the psychological complexity, the Odyssey, as we have it, Odysseus is going to leave again soon. We are told that.
Hmm.
And he's going to die all alone in some far distant land on his wanderings.
Yeah, which is kind of an
And
amazing ending.
and to miss the opportunity to explore what is it that makes a man not through any war trauma, that's not remotely in the poem, what is it that makes some men completely unable to settle? That is such an interesting question
Well,
existentially.
totally. And I mean, I think there's some controversy about how Emily Wilson interpreted the first lines where Homer describes Odysseus, and she says he's a complicated man, kind of
Yeah,
like Shaft. But what's the word? Polytropos, right?
yeah.
Like a man of like many turnings, something like
You,
that.
it means lots of different things, including a man about whom many stories are told. But
Uh-huh.
it can actually just mean somebody who cannot stop twisting
Yeah,
and
well,
turning.
that's what I was thinking. Like the
Yeah.
man, yeah.
Emily's quite right. She's a good friend of mine, and we've talked about all of this an awful lot, as you can
Well,
imagine.
it's a tough one. Like, how do you kind of succinctly
But
translate
but
that? You know?
the point where I realised that he just hadn't got it in terms of this, what would be a truly great movie about a man who half of him wants nothing more than to settle down as a peasant farmer with his lovely wife and son, but he just
He can't help
cannot do.
himself.
And he's deeply curious, which is a very,
Yeah.
very Greek thing. That's why they invented philosophy, right? The curiosity. People don't notice, but in the Odyssey, as we've got it, he doesn't have to go to the Cyclops Island. He's gone to another island because they just had to get food and drink. On that island, he says, but I've got to go to the other one. I can hear voices. I've got to find out what sort of beings those are. And his men say, no, 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 let's go home. We've got water. We've got. He says, no, I've got to find out, which is the reason he's got to hear the sirens song.
Yeah, I've got to
So,
hear the song. Like, I
yeah.
mean, I can totally relate. It's like, God, you've got this opportunity to hear the siren song. Like, tie me to the fucking mast. I want to hear it.
But also the sit by doing what he did to Circe, so on Calypso's island, yes, though he's not taking Lotus, that's another story.
Yeah.
But he is confined by Calypso. He has no way of getting off. The gods haven't agreed he can get off.
Well,
Circe,
he's more entranced by sex, I think, by on Calypso's island.
Circe, well, all right, but it does say he sat on the beach weeping every single day,
Yeah.
right? Circe, oh no. Once he's got his men changed back from pigs, and she's a dignified queen, and this is where it's not a very feminist movie for me. Circe, instead of being a splendid queen of a wonderful zoological park, with whom Odysseus stays having sex for a whole year for no reason whatsoever. And in fact, the sexiest moment by far in the actual Odyssey is when he points his sword at her and she kind of collapses like, oh, Odysseus. Right. It's the
My,
only
what a
moment
big
of
sword you have.
it's the only moment of serious sexual promise. There's certainly none with Penelope. And he stays a whole year feasting and having sex with Circe.
Yeah,
That is the man I'm interested in. That is the wandering rolling stone that gathers no moss.
I
And
know.
that intention with the wonderful wife and kingdom and son is that would have been a great movie.
Yeah, I think so too. Just a depiction of a man who is actually very complicated and complex and kind of
Easily bored.
morally ambiguous as well, like not so
Exactly.
clear cut. Like this is, a man who's suffering, who's doing his best and all that. No, he's way more complicated and therefore way more interesting.
And way more like you and me and everybody, you
Well, it's
know.
kind of like Medea in that way, like these incredibly complicated characters that
Yeah.
can't be distilled down to a stereotype or something,
No.
you know?
You know what? The greatest movie has ever been made of the Odyssey, which did manage this, was 1954 with Kirk Douglas.
Oh
It's in,
yeah, I haven't watched
it's
that one yet.
well, that has got real psychological depth. For example, the wonderful actress, I think she was called Silvia Mangano, which was staggeringly beautiful Italian actress, played, guess what, both Penelope and Circe.
Hmm, interesting.
Yeah. So they were really getting somewhere that, you know,
Yeah.
that his ideas about women, and there was the dark woman and the light woman, and
Hmm.
so there was a real attempt to, and he comes off as not very nice guy. fascinating guy, admirable guy in lots of ways, his courage, his intelligence, his curiosity. But that cannot settle down. And as I said, we have all known people like that. Moreover, most of us have got part of us that if we could just leave our very settled house and marriage and go off and have fabulous sex on an island for a few, we jolly
Sounds
well,
amazing.
if we could do it without repercussions or loss, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, he does lament the losses, but it doesn't really stop him.
No. So for me, it's not enough.
I know.
But that's maybe we need a French existentialist auteur to make that movie.
I know, totally. Yeah, it has to come from somewhere else at this point, I think, than Hollywood.
Yeah,
Someplace where people are
exactly.
still courageous and understand the kind of desire in viewers as well for these emotionally, morally complex characters.
Yeah.
I think we people really want that, but when you're only spoon-fed these kind of one-sided, one-note caricatures, it's kind of like bread and circuses kind of
You,
thing,
you know, you know the film this year that I think did do that very interestingly until the Hollywood ending was Marty Supreme.
Hmm.
Did you see Marty Supreme?
Honestly, I had to drop out of it. I didn't get
Did
into it.
you?
Yeah. I thought it could have been a way
I
more interesting movie about ping pong.
well, I actually thought that this guy who is just so driven by personal pride and ambition that he can't do settling, to me that was more of an Odyssey than this
Mm.
one.
Yeah, a movie I watched recently that you might appreciate, Night Bitch with Amy Adams.
That I haven't seen.
Yeah, again, very complicated depiction of a mother, but I don't think got seen very much because it, you know,
I will look out for it.
yeah.
She's a she is a something of an actress, though. She is
Oh my God, she's
superb.
she's amazing.
Yeah,
Maybe actually a good Circe when our dream Odyssey gets made.
yeah.
Um,
No, I need glamorous, powerful, dignified queen of zoological gardens
yeah, and someone sexy too,
and deeply sexy and has a whole year's sex with our hero. Yeah,
with our curious man.
yeah.
Tell me about this sex magic. I love it. Well, let's keep imagining this version yet to be made, and just put it out there in the universe. Edith Hall, it's been really great speaking with you. The new book is called Medea, A Life, and I think people who want a more complex depiction of this woman, all kind of in one narrative, are really going to enjoy it.
Thank you so much for having me.
This conversation is brought to you ad-free thanks to the generous support of the Howl in the Wilderness Patreon community. To gain access to early release of all episodes, the full podcast archives, and other extras, please visit patreon.com/Howl in the Wilderness.